The cold in Chicago in January is not simply weather. It is a presence. It has weight and intention, and it moves through the gaps in your coat like something that has decided to find you personally. On the night of January the 9th, the temperature on 63rd Street had dropped to 11 degrees before 7 in the evening, and the wind coming off the lake was the kind that made grown men lower their heads and walk faster without deciding to. Ruby's Diner sat on the corner of 63rd and Calumet the way it had sat there for 31 years. Squat and warm and lit from inside with yellow light that looked, from the street, like the last fire in a cold world. The smell of it reached the pavement before you opened the door. Grease and coffee and something sweet that Ruby herself had never fully explained. The booths were red vinyl, cracked at the corners. The counter stools spun if you pushed them right. The menus had not changed since 2008, and Ruby had no intention of changing them. Dominic Reeves sat in the back booth. He had been sitting there for 40 minutes, which was not unusual. He came every Tuesday and sometimes Thursday, always after dark, always alone, always a back booth. He ordered black coffee and nothing else, and he left $50 on a $4 tab every single time. Ruby had been taking that $50 without comment for 11 years. She did not ask about his day. She did not make conversation. She brought the coffee, refilled it once without being asked, and left him to whatever silence he carried with him. Most people who came into Ruby's on a Tuesday night did not notice the man in the back booth. He had cultivated a quality of stillness that made him easy to overlook. Broad shoulders held in, eyes down, the particular invisibility of a man who had spent decades practicing it. Those who did notice him felt something they could not name and found reasons to look away. Children, occasionally, stared at him with the unfiltered curiosity that adults had trained themselves out of. He never responded to the staring. He simply waited for it to end. He was 43 years old. He had been called Ghost for 21 of those years, first as a street name, then as a reputation, then as something closer to a fact. In certain neighborhoods of Chicago's South Side, his name was a period at the end of a sentence, the thing that made further discussion unnecessary. He was nursing his second coffee when the door opened. The boy came in alone. He was small, smaller than the coat he was wearing, which had clearly belonged to someone else and hung from his shoulders like a thing that had given up trying to fit. He wore no hat. His ears were red from the cold. He could not have been more than 6 years old, and he walked with particular seriousness of a child who has been given an important task and is determined not to fail it. He went directly to the counter, not to a booth, not to look around, straight to the counter, as though he had rehearsed the route. He climbed onto a stool, placed both hands flat on the formica surface, and waited. Ruby came out from the kitchen. She looked at the boy, then she looked toward the door, expecting an adult to follow. No one came. "Hey, little man," she said, her voice carrying that particular softness she reserved for children and old people. "You by yourself?" "Yes, ma'am," the boy said. His voice was steady. "Where's your mama?" "At work." Ruby studied him for a moment. Then she nodded, the way people nod when they decide to ask the practical question instead of the complicated one. "What can I get you, sweetheart?" The boy reached into both pockets at once and pulled out what he had. He placed it on the counter with both hands, the careful, deliberate motion of someone handling something precious. A crumpled dollar bill, flattened as much as small fingers could manage. And then the coins. He arranged them in a loose pile, not counting them out loud, just placing them all on the surface and looking at them for a moment. Then he looked up at Ruby. "Is $2.72 enough to eat?" The diner went quiet, not dramatically, not all at once, but the two women in the middle booth stopped their conversation mid-sentence. The man at the far end of the counter stopped chewing. The cook, visible through the pass-through window, went still with a spatula in his hand. Ruby looked at the coins. She looked at the boy. Her expression did not break. She was a woman who had learned to carry hard things without showing the weight, but something moved behind her eyes. "Baby," she said very quietly, "what do you want to eat?" "Something hot," the boy said, "and maybe something I can take home." In the back booth, Dominic Reeves had not moved. He was looking at the boy from the shadows with the careful attention he usually reserved for things that required assessment, But there was nothing to assess here. There was no threat. There was no angle. There was only a 6-year-old in an oversized coat with $2.72 and the composure of someone twice his age, asking a question that should never have needed asking. Dominic felt something move in his chest. It was unfamiliar. It was unwelcome. It was a feeling of a door opening in a room he had sealed shut years ago and had not planned to re-enter. He looked down at his coffee. Ruby was already moving. She took the coins and the dollar bill and put them in her apron pocket. Then she went to the kitchen and came back with a bowl of chicken soup, a plate of cornbread, and a brown paper bag folded at the top. "The $2.72 covers everything," she told the boy, "including the bag." The boy looked at the food, then at Ruby. Then he said, "Thank you, ma'am," with a sincerity so complete it had no performance in it whatsoever. Dominic Reeves watched the boy eat, and for the first time and longer than he could account for, he did not want to leave. Dominic did not follow the boy that night. He sat in the back booth until the boy finished his soup, wrapped the brown paper bag carefully in both arms, climbed down from the counter stool, said goodbye to Ruby, and walked out into the cold. He sat there another 10 minutes. After that, Ruby refilled his coffee without being asked. Neither of them said anything. The diner noise came back slowly, like water filling a space, and eventually the other customers returned to their conversations and their meals, and Dominic was invisible again. But he came back the next night. He told himself it was habit. Tuesday and Thursday. Nothing had changed. He ordered the same coffee, sat in the same booth, looked at the same cracked vinyl across from him. But at 7:15, when the door opened and lent a blade of cold air, he looked up before he had decided to look up. It was not the boy. It was a woman in scrubs under a heavy coat, ordering a coffee to go, paying with exact change. She left quickly. Dominic looked back at the table. He came back Thursday, and the following Tuesday. On the third Tuesday at 7:40, the boy came in again. Same coat, same counter stool. This time he had a small backpack. He ordered hot chocolate. Ruby had it ready before he finished asking, which told Dominic that Ruby had been expecting him. He drank it slowly, did his homework on a single sheet of paper. He spread flat on the counter, asked Ruby how to spell necessary, and left at 8 o'clock exactly. Dominic waited 5 minutes and then did something he had not done in years without strategic purpose. He followed someone out of simple need to know. The boy walked 3 blocks south on Calumet, turned left on 66, and went into a building Dominic knew without having to think about it. A 6th-floor walk-up, brown brick. The kind of building that had once been solidly working class and had been quietly hollowing out for 15 years. The lobby buzzer panel had half its labels missing. The hallway light on the ground floor had been out for months. Dominic knew this because one of his lieutenants ran the corner outside it, the same corner that had been producing a reliable if modest return for 3 years. The boy went up the stairs without hesitation. 4th floor. Dominic stood in the lobby long enough to hear a door open and close above him. Then he stepped back outside into the cold. He stood on the pavement and looked up at the building's face. One window on the 4th floor had a light on. The curtain was thin enough that he could see a shape moving behind it. Small, quick, the movement of a child settling in for the evening. Dominic put his hands in his pockets. He had stood outside worse places for worse reasons. He had delivered worse news to people in worse buildings with less hesitation than this. But standing on that pavement, looking up at a lit window on the 4th floor, he felt something that required him to stand very still for a moment before he could move again. He found out the rest the way he found out everything, by asking the right questions of the right people in the right order. His lieutenant knew the building. He knew most of the tenants by sight, if not by name. The woman in 4C worked at the hospital laundry on Cottage Grove. Double shifts, 3 days a week, sometimes 4. Single mother. Boy was about 6. Never any trouble. Kept to themselves. The father, his lieutenant said with a particular careful neutrality, had not been around in years. Dominic did not ask for more on that. He asked about the boy. His name was Caleb. He walked to school on his own on the mornings his mother left before 7. He came home on his own in the afternoons, let himself in with a key he wore on a lanyard around his neck, and waited until his mother got home, usually by 9. On the night she worked a late extension, a neighbor on the third floor kept an ear out, an older woman named Miss Pauline, who was 70 and hard of hearing but reliable. Dominic processed all of this without visible reaction. What he processed privately, alone in his car afterward, was a different matter. The boy was 6 years old. He was navigating a cold Chicago winter largely on his own. He was budgeting coins from a windowsill jar for meals at a diner 3 blocks from his building, doing homework on a diner counter because the library closed before his mother got home, and doing all of it with composure and a dignity that most men Dominic had known for decades could not match. And then there was the other thing. The thing that hit him in the quiet of his car and did not let go. The boy would be 6. Almost 7. Dominic's son, if the word still applied, if he still had the right to use it, would be 7 in March. He had not seen him since he was 3 weeks old. He had made that choice in a hospital corridor on a February morning, looking at a woman who loved him standing in front of a door that led to everything he was not allowed to have. He had walked away because walking away was the only version of protection he knew how to give. He thought about that now. He thought about what a boy who has walked away from learns about the world in the years that follow. He started the car and sat with the heat, running for a long time without driving anywhere. It took him 2 days to do it, not because he couldn't decide. Dominic Reeves had been making decisions quickly under pressure since he was 19 years old. Decisions that other men took days to reach, he reached in seconds. The 2 days were not indecision. They were the particular resistance of a man doing something that did not fit the shape of anything he had done before, and therefore had no existing movement to fall into. On a Thursday morning at 10:43, Dominic Reeves walked into a grocery store on 71st Street. He had a basket. He moved through the aisles with the careful attention of someone reading a foreign language, pausing at sections he had not browsed in years, picking things up and putting them back, eventually settling into a rhythm. He bought rice and chicken and canned tomatoes and a bag of dry black beans. He bought bread and peanut butter and a jar of honey and a box of oats. He bought apples and a bunch of bananas and a small block of cheddar cheese. He stood in the cereal aisle for an unreasonable amount of time and ultimately chose the one with the cartoon on the box because it was the one he remembered wanting as a child and being told was too expensive. He paid in cash. He did not make eye contact with the cashier. He drove to 66th Street, parked half a block down, and carried both bags to the building on foot. The lobby was empty. He set the bags at the base of the stairs, not inside the stairwell, but in the corner of the lobby where they would be seen immediately by anyone coming down. He took a receipt from his pocket. He had written on the back of it with a pen from the car, and tucked it under the handle of the bag closest to the wall. The note said, "For the boy in 4C. That was all. No signature. No explanation. He was back on the pavement in under 90 seconds. He did not look up at the 4th floor window as he walked back to his car. He did not need to see it. He had done the thing. It was done. What he did not know was that Caleb was home. It was a half day at school, a fact his mother had written on the kitchen calendar in green marker, but which had not been communicated to Miss Pauline, who had therefore not been watching for him. Caleb had let himself in at noon, made himself a peanut butter sandwich from the near-empty jar in the cabinet, and then settled at the kitchen window with a book. His preferred position, the window, because he could see the street, and the street was always doing something. He saw the big man in the black coat come out of the lobby. He did not know the man's name. He had seen him before, at the diner, in the back booth, the man who was always there and never seemed to be eating anything. Caleb had noticed in the way children notice things that adults have agreed to stop seeing. The man was very big and very still, and he always left before Caleb did, which meant he had never been in the diner at the same time as Caleb's mother, which was a measure Caleb used for most adults, whether or not his mother had seen them. The man came out of the lobby carrying nothing, walked to a car parked down the block, and drove away without looking back. Caleb went downstairs. He found the bags. He read the note, sounding out the letters carefully, confirming each word. He stood in the lobby for a moment, holding the note in both hands, thinking about it the way 6-year-olds think about things that don't immediately make sense. Then he carried both bags upstairs, one at a time, and put the food away in the kitchen. He folded the brown bags neatly and put them in the drawer, where his mother kept her extra shopping bags. He put the note on the refrigerator under the magnet shaped like the state of Illinois. When his mother came home at 9:15 that night and opened the refrigerator and went still, Caleb was already in bed. She stood in the kitchen for a long moment, reading the note on the refrigerator. Then she sat down on the kitchen floor and stayed there for a while. In the morning, before her shift, she went to Ruby's diner. She did not know what she was looking for. She sat at the counter and ordered coffee she could barely afford and asked Ruby, quietly, whether she knew who might have left groceries for a family on 66th Street. Ruby poured the coffee. She did not answer the question directly. She looked at the woman in the scrubs, tired eyes, careful hands, the look of someone caring more than the body was designed for, and she said, "You Caleb's mama?" The woman looked up. "Yes." "He's a good boy," Ruby said. "Real good." She refilled the coffee without being asked. Some people in this neighborhood watch out for good things without needing credit for it. Best thing you can do is let them. She did not charge for coffee. The woman, her name was Nadia, sat with that answer for the length of her cup. Then she left for her shift. She did not push further. But she came back the next morning, and the morning after that. By the end of the week, Ruby had saved her the same stool at the counter, without being asked. You are still here, and that matters. These are the stories that remind us what people are capable of when no one is watching. Share this with someone who needs to believe in something today. Follow Echo True Stories, and never stop listening for the echo. Word on the South Side did not travel loud. It traveled the way cold moved through walls. Quietly, completely, finding every gap. By the Friday after the groceries, 3 people knew that ghosts had been seen coming out of a residential building on 66th Street, carrying nothing, which meant he had gone and carrying something and left it there. By Saturday morning, it was 6 people. By Sunday evening, it was 14. Among those 14 was a man named Raymond Sutton. Ray Sutton was 40 years old and had been operating on the South Side for 12 years with particular ambition of a man who had watched someone else hold power and had decided, at a cellular level, that it should be his. He ran 3 blocks east of Ghost territory, controlled 2 distribution points, and had spent the better part of 2 years probing for a way inside Ghost's operation that didn't involve a direct confrontation. He was not yet certain he could win. Ghost was not reckless. Ghost was not visible. Ghost did not have obvious weaknesses. No flashy lifestyle to disrupt, no loud associates to turn, no public face to damage. Until now, Ray heard the grocery story, and he heard it the way predators hear the particular sound of something changing in the brush. Not with complete understanding. With instinct. Ghost had done something soft. Ghost had attached himself, for reasons nobody could explain, to a woman and a child in a building on 66th Street. In Ray's world, that was not a mystery to solve. It was a door to walk through. He did not move immediately. He was not impulsive. That was one of the few things about Ray Sutton that had kept him alive. He watched for a week. He confirmed what he could confirm. He learned that ghosts had been seen at Ruby's diner multiple times recently and had been observed watching the door. He learned that a boy from the 66th Street building came to the diner regularly. He learned the boy's name. Then he made his decision. He sent 2 men to Ruby's diner on a Wednesday evening with simple instructions. Not to hurt anyone. Not yet. To sit, to be seen, to let Ghost, if Ghost was there, or if anyone would tell Ghost was there, understand that Ray Sutton knew where he spent his Wednesdays, that the boy and his mother were known, that the diner was not the private sanctuary Ghost seemed to believe it was. It was a message, clean, deniable. It was also the worst decision Ray Sutton had ever made, though he would not understand that until it was already too late. What Ray did not know, could not have known, because it existed in a part of Ghost that the street had never seen, was what the boy represented to him. Ray was calculating based on the version of Ghost that the South Side had always known. The man who operated without attachment. The man who had excised every vulnerability with the same cold efficiency he applied to everything else. He did not know about the hospital corridor in February, 7 years ago. He did not know about a woman named Simone and a boy who would be 7 in March. He did not know that for 7 years, Dominic Reeves had been leaving money in an account the mother didn't know was from him, regular, anonymous, enough to make sure the boy had what he needed without Dominic's presence poisoning his life. He did not know that protecting Caleb was not sentiment. It was practice. 7 years of loving someone from a distance had not made Ghost soft. It had made him a man who knew exactly what he was protecting, and exactly how much he was willing to pay to protect it. And he did not know about Ruby. On Wednesday evening, 20 minutes before Ray's 2 men arrived, Ruby looked up from behind the counter and saw a face she recognized from 11 years of reading this neighborhood. She knew the shape of trouble before it walked through a door, the particular quality of stillness in men who are not here to eat. She watched them take a booth near the window. She watched them order coffee and not drink it. She watched one of them look slowly around the room, and then look at the door, and then look at the back booth where Dominic was sitting. Ruby reached on the counter. She had a phone there, an old one, kept in a specific place. She had programmed one number into it 11 years ago and had never used it, had never needed to, had half believed over the years that she never would. She picked it up now and pressed a number and held it to her ear. It rang once. "Ruby," Dominic said. "Not a question." "2 men," she said. "Window booth. They're not here for the food." "I know," he said. "I'm already outside." He had been outside for 6 minutes. Not because he had been tipped off, not because he had surveillance on the diner, or anyone watching the block. He had been outside because it was Wednesday, and on Wednesdays and Thursdays now he came early. He parked on the street, and he waited until he saw Caleb's light go on the 4th floor of the building on 66th Street, and then he walked to the diner. And he sat in the back booth, and he stayed until the diner was closing. He had not examined this habit too closely. He had simply developed it, the way a man grows into a responsibility, without formally accepting it. He had seen Ray's men arrive from the car. He had recognized one of them, a young man named Terrell who ran errands for Ray's operation, and had enough ambition to be dangerous, and not quite enough sense to understand why. He had sat in the car, and he had thought about his options with the same flat efficiency. He applied to every situation that required resolution. Then he thought about something else. He thought about Caleb doing homework on a diner counter. He thought about $2.72 placed on Formica with 2 hands. He thought about a note on a refrigerator under a magnet shaped like Illinois, and a woman sitting on a kitchen floor in the middle of the night because someone had put food in her refrigerator without wanting anything back. He thought about what kind of man he wanted to be in the same room as those things. Then his phone rang, Ruby's number, and he was already moving. He came through the diner door without urgency. He did not look at Terrell and the other man immediately. He went to the back booth, sat down, and let Ruby bring him his coffee. He wrapped both hands around the cup. He looked at the table. Nadia was at the counter. She had come in 20 minutes earlier after her shift, as she had been doing most evenings this week. She was on the second stool from the left, Caleb's stool, with her hands around her own coffee, talking to Ruby in the low, easy way of 2 women who had decided they trusted each other. She had her coat still on. Her scrub showed at the collar. She looked tired in the specific way of someone who had been tired for so long it had become just a texture of her life rather than a temporary condition. Dominic looked at her for a moment. He did not know her name yet. He knew her as the woman in 4C, the woman whose refrigerator had been empty, the woman who had sat in this diner asking careful questions about kindness and had accepted Ruby's answer with the grace of someone who understood that some things were not meant to be fully explained. Terrell had noticed Dominic come in. He had sat up slightly in the window booth. The other man, older, someone Dominic did not recognize, had put down his coffee cup and turned his body at an angle that was not subtle. Dominic let them sit with that for a moment. Then he stood up, walked to the window booth, and sat down across from them. The diner did not go quiet this time. The other customers did not freeze. Because to everyone else in the room, it looked like nothing. A man joining 2 acquaintances. Nothing unusual. Only Terrell and the man across from him understood what was actually happening, which was that Ghost had just removed any ambiguity from the situation by removing the distance. "Tell Ray," Dominic said, "that the diner is not part of anything. The building on 66 is not part of anything. The boy and his mother are not part of anything. His voice was the same temperature it always was. Not cold exactly, but the kind of even that made cold seem like an overreaction. Tell him I said that once. This is the once. Terrell opened his mouth. That's all, Dominic said. They left 4 minutes later. Coffee's unfinished, without saying another word. Dominic sat in their booth for a moment after they were gone. He looked out the window at the street, the cold, the empty pavement, the streetlight doing its small work against the dark. Then he became aware that someone was looking at him. He turned. Nadia was watching him from the counter, not with fear, not with the particular wariness that most people pointed at him when they finally understood who he was. She was watching him with an expression he had not had directed at him in a very long time. The expression of someone trying to understand a thing they were not sure they had permission to ask about. Ruby moved to the far end of the counter and found something to do there. Dominic got up. He carried his coffee back to the counter and sat down 2 stools from Nadia, leaving 1 stool between them. He put both hands around the cup. Nadia looked at the space between them. Then she said, "You're the one who left food." It was not a question. He did not deny it. He looked at his coffee and said, "Your boy asked a question. Nobody that age should have to ask it." Nadia was quiet for a moment. "He told me a big man in a black coat left the bags. He thought you were a good person." She paused. "He doesn't know." "No," Dominic said. "He doesn't. Should he?" The question sat between them. Dominic turned it over carefully, the way he turned over things that had weight. "Not yet," he said finally. "Maybe not as me. Maybe just as someone who lives in the neighborhood and watches out for good things." He stopped. "That's what Ruby told you, isn't it?" Something shifted in Nadia's expression. "Yes. She's been telling people that for 30 years. About different people. It's the only story this neighborhood has that doesn't end badly." Nadia looked at him for a long moment. "What's your name?" No one had asked him that in years. Not his real name. The name his mother had given him. The name that existed before the street gave him another one. People either knew him or they knew of him, and in both cases the name they used was not the one he was born with. He looked at her. He thought about a hospital corridor. A door. A choice he had made in the belief that love sometimes looked like leaving. He thought about 7 years of anonymous deposits and birthday months he had watched from a distance, and a child he had never held past the first 3 weeks. He thought about Caleb's coins on the counter and the particular weight of a question asked without any understanding of how heavy it was. He thought about what it meant to finally give someone something real instead of something careful. "Dominic," he said. Nadia nodded slowly. "Nadia." "I know," he said. Then, when her eyes sharpened, the building super talks. She almost smiled. It was small and it was tired, but it was real. Ruby appeared from the kitchen with a plate of cornbread she set between them, without comment, and disappeared again. They sat there for a while. 2 people in a warm diner on a cold Chicago night, with a plate of cornbread between them and the particular quiet of strangers who have already been introduced by something larger than themselves. Outside, the wind moved down 63rd Street. The streetlight held its ground. 3 blocks away, on the 4th floor of a walk-up on 66th, a boy named Caleb was asleep under 2 blankets with a full stomach and a refrigerator that was no longer empty. He did not know what had happened in the diner that night. He did not know about Terrell and Ray Sutton and the message that had been delivered and the line that had been drawn. He did not know about a man named Dominic who sat in the back booth watching the door. He did not know that the question he had asked the counterwaiter with $2.72 and 2 hands full of coins had cracked something open in the most unlikely chest on the south side of Chicago and set in motion a chain of quiet, invisible kindness that had changed more than he would ever be told. He only knew that there was food in the kitchen, that his mother had come home, smiling for the first time in a while, that the world, which was often hard and cold and indifferent, had done something warm in his direction. He had filed his away as a simple fact, the way children file away the things they believe in, not as exceptions, but as evidence, proof of what the world is capable of, proof he would carry with him for the rest of his life, long after he had forgotten where it came from. In the morning, He would go to school with that fact in his pocket. He would not know it was armor, but it was. You made it to the end. And this story will stay with you because it is true in a way that matters. Not because it happened exactly like this, but because somewhere right now, someone is placing coins on a counter. And somewhere right now, someone is paying attention. Follow Echoed True Stories. Share this story, because the truth only echoes when someone passes it on.